WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, thank you for tuning in. Dana Gioia is on the phone. He's a celebrated poet. I got a little bit of feedback going on here. Not sure what that's from. He is a former chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts. He's a critic, a writer. Critic, oh man.
Look at, we better be in our best behavior.
And he's a professor of poetry and public culture at the University of Southern California. So we must have got him up early out in the West Coast. I'm just presuming, maybe I'm wrong. We're going to talk about the Catholic writer today. He is going to talk about encouraging Catholic writers to renovate and reoccupy their own tradition. Dana Gioia's article is in the First Things publication. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's find out about this from Dana himself. He's on the phone. Good morning, Dana. Thank you for being on our show today.
Good morning. It is early out here, at least for a night owl like me.
and where are you in California?
I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay, why?
It's actually my hometown, where I now teach half the year at USC.
Okay. And real quickly, Time Magazine named the new pope the Person of the Year, whatever they call that thing. Is that good news for Catholicism in general?
Absolutely. I think it represents the fact that, although the Catholic Church has gone through a crisis really in the last few years, it seems to be coming back.
Yeah, and I was glad to see that as well. Dana, tell me what you mean, and maybe this is misquoting you, but where it says to encourage Catholic writers to renovate and reoccupy their own tradition. What does that mean?
Well, the main thesis of my article is that although Catholics are the largest religious group in the United States, and you can use Catholics almost as a symbol of Christians in general. I mean, it's the majority faith of the culture. Catholics are now almost invisible in the arts. I mean, you don't see people that are Catholics talked about or presented as painters, as musicians, and certainly not as novelists, as poets. Now, if this doesn't seem odd to you, if you went back 50 years ago, an extraordinary number of the most famous writers in the United States were believing Catholics and talked about their faith. I mean, we're talking about Ernest Hemingway, Flannery O'Connor, Catherine Ann Porter, even Jack Kerouac, the Beat, was a Catholic, and Catholicism was seen as a kind of an identity that was actually rather friendly to artists.
That's an interesting.
A great tradition.
That's interesting. Now, the question I have is: are there fewer Catholic writers, or are they just not advertising their faith, for lack of a better way to ask that question?
Well, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I mean, I cannot believe that 1/4 of the population doesn't, create a number of distinguished artists in every field.
Right.
There's a few people, that are, a few well-known writers that identify themselves as Catholics, but I think Catholics are less likely to be encouraged to write, and a lot of Catholics probably even hide their faith because it doesn't do them any good in the literary world, in the arts world. And so what you see is either a shrinking or a silencing, or more likely both.
When we watch stand-up comics and somebody's a Jewish stand-up comic, and quite often in writing, Woody Allen is a good example, I guess, maybe Larry David, their Judaism there's no problem expressing it, but I guess you're right, I haven't really seen a whole lot of that with the Catholic faith being represented in the storytelling. Not that it doesn't exist, not that Christian faiths aren't presented, but Catholicism specifically. And again, just going back to the comics, a Jewish comic will sometimes kind of poke fun at his Jewish heritage or her Jewish culture, whereas once upon a time, I guess we would do that as Christians or Catholics especially, but not anymore.
Well, usually if a Catholic or a Christian is presented in the media, like in a show, they turn out to be the villain or the murderer. I mean, it's something that's that's there for sort of dramatic effect. But I mean, Jewish artists are a perfect example. They feel comfortable expressing their cultural identity, their ethnic identity, their religious identity, because it's part of them.
Right.
And I think a strong artist is always, himself or herself. They can create out of the center of their being, out of their true identity. And if they feel reluctant to express that, or if they feel by expressing it they will be attacked, that it tends to disappear. And there is, without a question right now, in American intellectual life, a reasonably strong and overt trend of anti-Catholicism.
Yeah, I think you're right.
There's one line that's really quite wonderful. The Hilary Mantel, she's British, but she's, the Booker Prize. She's one of the most famous novelists in the English-speaking world. She says in a very British way, no respectable person could be a Catholic. And I think that's a sentiment that is unfortunately echoed through American culture at the moment. And if you're a young Catholic writer, you go,
what the heck is wrong with her?
I better keep it quiet.
Yeah.
What's wrong with her? Why would somebody say that about somebody? I mean, gosh, can you imagine saying that about any other group? So what is your theory about this? I mean, why do you think this is? Why are Catholics being singled out and being, blondes? This happens to blondes too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the jokes are about blondes nowadays. Yeah. So what's going on? Why this artificial stigma?
Well, if I can be grand and sweeping for a moment, I think it goes all the way back to the French Revolution. That there's been a movement for centuries which sort of feels that if you could take religion out of society, if you could remove this superstition, all of this backwards, sort of traditionalism called religion, then people would suddenly, become scientific and rational and democratic, and you could have peace on earth. You can see how well that theory worked in the French Revolution, but have this kind of secularism as a kind of sect, and Catholicism is always at the center of their hatred, and you see it. In revolutions like the Mexican revolutions, where they not only killed priests, they crucified all the priests, they looted the churches. That at the center of this is the Catholic Church because it's the oldest, the most visible, and it's international, and so that is perceived as the center of the enemy. The problem with this theory is, I think, quite simple, and nobody ever points this out. If you take religion out of a society, if you take religion out of people's lives, they don't replace it with philosophy and scientific rationalism. Those spiritual hungers remain, and they tend to substitute to feed those hungers with things that are cheaper. Wiccan websites, paranormal teen romances, horoscopes and fortune tellers. Right. And so and you see this everywhere in our culture. I mean, just look at primetime television. It's enormously supernatural with all kinds of a mishmash of things because people long for a transcendent vision. And when you take the ones that are actually older, more normal, more thoughtful, more humane, then they get substituted basically by the spiritual equivalent of junk food.
Let me ask you something. Is this a vocal minority that is giving the appearance? Because in my real world, and again, this is just me, but the people who are Catholic are having no problem at all just being Catholic and practicing what Catholicism teaches and celebrating the Christmas season right now and going to Mass, and there's really not the stigma that you're saying, but I see this. I see this in the media. I see it in the movies. I see it on TV, in literature, but I don't see it in my real world. Is this a vocal minority that's creating an image that is not representative of the real America?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, average people tend to be respectful of one another's views, because they have a kind of civic, social common sense. If you want to get to people that are very anxious to lead your life and make decisions for you and tell you how wrong you are, you go to intellectual life, And this is an overt trend, not among the common person, who tends to be respectful of their neighbor's beliefs, but among intellectuals, artists, people in the media, who really feel that they know, what changes need to be made to perfect society. And I think you see it most noticeably in academia, in sort of the metropolitan art world,
right.
New York arts world, and things like this. About a few years ago, I read this is the lead sentence of a book review in the New York Times Review of Books, and it began, "The reason that I hate and fear Christians is." Now, then it went on. Nobody complained about it. The fear and the hatred was never qualified or anything else. It was simply taken as, well, this is a reasonable statement.
Yeah, right.
And I've got a whole file of these. I mean, people don't. I just do it so it just makes sure that I'm not crazy myself.
But this is a weird world we live in. I'm trying to imagine if you had a Catholic Jerry Seinfeld. Okay, and I'm not picking on Jerry Seinfeld. I'm just picking somebody who's very popular and who has no problem expressing that he was brought up Jewish. But if you had the equivalent in Catholic Jerry Seinfeld, the media you're talking about, the New York Times and everybody, they would do the same thing. Or if you had a Catholic president, John F. Kennedy, was he the last Catholic? The first and the last?
The only.
Yeah.
First and only.
First and last. Yeah. So I mean, but again, that might not change the way that the people who want to bash anybody for whatever it is they believe, I think those people will still be there. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I do not think, this will sound very curious for me to say, I don't think I should worry about changing the opinions of people who hate me.
That's right.
Or who hate the group that I'm in. Because by definition, that's what they're doing. My problem, I think, is to make Catholics, more secure and more forthright about understanding and being proud of their own identity. We need to match that kind of prejudice, especially for the artists. I mean, writers need to come forward and take possession of their own tradition. I mean, this is the tradition of Michelangelo, Raphael, Dante, Beethoven, Mozart. This is a great artistic tradition. And rather than sort of hide because we think people are going to attack us, I'm not talking about myself personally because I tend to be shamelessly self-assertive. I'll tell you, since this article has come out, I have been deluged by mail from Catholic writers, Catholic artists, Catholic teachers, Catholic professors who begin telling me these stories. So I don't think I'm making this up. But the fact is that if we're going to solve it, we're going to solve it by starting with ourselves, being proud and secure about what we have and demanding people respect it. I mean, the funny thing is that this anti-Catholic trend, this anti-Christian trend, has happened among intellectuals in our society at a time when they're proclaiming diversity as their code.
Right. How ironic is that? Yeah.
Yeah. And so the fact is that
hypocritical is a better word. Yeah.
Yeah. Diversity basically, in their mind, means a certain kind of uniformity, which is uniformly put upon people of all types. And so this is what I'm asking simply is to be, if not respected, tolerated.
So are they not?
Makes us different.
Are the Catholics that are prominent right now just not? Do you feel like they should do more? Let me just name some, and I cheated here. I went to Wikipedia. It says Alec Baldwin is Catholic, James Cagney, Steve Carell, the guy from The Office. I love that show. Jimmy Fallon is Catholic. Madonna is Catholic. Mel Gibson is Catholic. So when we name these people who are household names and we see that they are Catholic, what is your comment about how they are conducting their careers? Are they just not including it in their work as much as they could have?
Mel Gibson, who's a very problematic character in any number of ways, is probably the only one there that is really a public Catholic. And even when he, and there's a whole controversy there, which would take a whole another show. But by and large, if you asked anybody on this, any person who watches TV all the time, what's Alec Baldwin's religion? Nobody would know. Now, James Cagney, who's been dead many years, they would, he was that. I mean, talk about Catholic comedians. You had Danny Thomas, who was very devout, very respectful, very popular, very funny. Right. But people like Danny Thomas almost immediately feel like you're in a time machine.
Now, Stallone is on the list too, and if I remember in Rocky, his Catholicism was all over that movie.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is the only art in which Catholicism is maybe 1 out of 3 times treated respectfully is in the movies, and that's because it's determined by the marketplace. If you have it, but Madonna is the perfect Catholic artist of today. Her entire relationship towards Catholicism is to take sacred symbols and writhe along them naked, while singing about sex.
Right.
Right. I mean, to use an old-fashioned term, which I don't tend to use in my own life, it's blasphemous. She's using sacred symbols for commercial appeal, for cheap effects.
Right.
And so the Catholics, by and large, in the arts, who are popular, are anti-Catholic ex-Catholics, people who use Catholic symbols as a sign that they've outgrown this superstitious medieval faith, and they use them for either censure or they use them for shock effect.
Interesting.
But,
and you see this all over.
But now the Catholic Church has grown by changing some of their rules. My folks were married in 1953. My dad was Catholic. My mother was Lutheran. They wanted to get married. The Catholic Church threw him out of the church because he was marrying a Lutheran. So they got married in a Lutheran church. And then the Lutheran church wouldn't allow my dad's brother, who was Catholic, to be his best man or be any part of the wedding party because of this stigma they had.
Wow.
So, but that was in 1953. Now, things have changed since then. People of all faiths seem to be able to be in wedding parties. Catholics don't throw their people out anymore. And they even allow divorce and, marry people that are divorced in their faith. So they have, tried to accommodate the people of the world in some aspects.
Catholicism still does not allow divorce. If you're married as a Catholic, you're married for life. Although they do have annulment,
Right, exactly.
Flexible
Right.
thing, but yeah, no, it is. I've been married twice, both to the same woman. Once in the Congregational Church, and then once years later in the Catholic Church, because my mother was driving me crazy that I wasn't really married. And once I told my parish priest that I hadn't been married in church, it took him about one day to arrange a wedding for me.
Oh, wow.
Even though my wife was still not Catholic, But so yeah, you're right. I think if this country was historically anti-Catholic. Catholicism was illegal, state but Maryland, and even in Maryland, every now and then when they would make it illegal because there was just too many Catholics around. So there is a tradition. So for the first century here, Catholics had a kind of fortress mentality because they were on the margins of the law, and there were political parties in the 19th.
You're fading
Hello.
out. Are you still there, Dana?
And I think as you came into the 20th century, there was still this remnant, of kind of Catholicism as this fortress. The Protestants were going to come with pitchforks and torches at any minute, and drive you out. I think now it's in American Christianity, it's a very ecumenical spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I once taught in Georgia, and these local people would come up to me, and I was the visiting distinguished writer at a Baptist college, and in southern Georgia, and I needed the money, so I took the job. Actually, very nice people down there. I had a good time, but these people come up to me and they go, I heard about you, and they go, are you Christian or are you Catholic?
Oh, no.
There you go.
And I said, well, gee, I didn't think there was a difference. And they go, well, there's a difference. But anyway.
And so where do they get that? And so that's what I don't get, because just knowing people who are Catholic and Baptist and Lutheran and even Jewish, I don't see that they're living their lives all that differently from one another, and it's the media that has these things issues.
Well,
You're making some really good points with what you're talking about, Dana. Though truthfully,
I'm a real I'm a working class Catholic kid. My mom was Mexican, my dad was Italian. I went to Catholic schools, and I was in the poorest possible neighborhood. I went to Catholic schools. The nuns and the priests were terrific teachers. I mean, my success in life comes very much out of these teachers that very early on, basically their message was, just because you're poor doesn't mean you should be dumb.
Oh, there you go.
And they pushed me, and I was very successful. So I have a lot of gratitude, towards the church, and I think that in general, religion even if you don't believe in it, is a very positive social force. It's a moral force.
Certainly.
It's a force in terms of creating community, and it does seem to me, part of one of the things that makes America a special country, which is the strength of civil society, of which the churches are the strongest institutions. And I see it attacked. I see it attacked in general terms in the press and the media. But when I get into my own art, which is the art of literature, I see this constant kind of snarky campaign. And the other writers feel it, and I see the writers in the younger generation. I'm an old guy. I'm 62, but I see these writers in their 20s, in their 30s, and they are, they feel they have to disguise these things, to be this. In fact, sometimes I'll give a talk, and a bunch of kids will wait until everybody else in the room is left. This is when I'm on the road giving readings and lectures at the universities. And they say, we were so surprised that you said you were Catholic. We've never had a speaker, a literary speaker at this school who's ever claimed to be religious. We didn't think it was possible to be religious and to be a writer. In fact, I've even had groups of Muslim students come up to me and thank me for saying I'm a Catholic because, they have felt that in the universities they were in, that there's so much anti-religious prejudice that
I'm sure.
So it's odd. Now maybe these people don't realize how much bias they are emanating.
Maybe
I think they do, though. I think that they have a very conscious campaign to secularize intellectual culture, artistic culture, because at some level they think anything else is superstitious, medieval, old-fashioned, and ignorant.
Right. The priest, the priest who died in the World Trade Center towers was beloved by the firefighters. He was the chaplain of the firefighters, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the priest that's in the news right now is the one up in Newtown. I think 26 of the children that died.
Yeah, that was very moving to hear him talk about that.
Yeah. And so the important role that they hold in their communities just illustrates that the average. What I'm trying to say here is that the average person really hasn't succumbed to this anti-Catholicism that you're referring to in the universities. And in our own community, some of the top leaders are the priests from our local Catholic churches. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, getting back to culture, I think that great art tends to have a kind of transcendent vision. It tends to create a sense of reality, a sense of ourselves that calls that which is best in us, that which is most noble, that which is most imaginative in us, into being, into kind of growth. And when you take that transcendent vision out of art, out of culture, it tends to be replaced, and I think anybody who looks at pop culture sees this now, a kind of cheap commercial art that speaks to what is weakest in us, what is, speaks to the worst parts of us. Video games, pornography, the kind of violence, and even things that are supposed to be arty, like Kill Bill. I mean,
I know.
Well, that's awful.
Into violence.
It's crazy.
And so, now once again, if people want to watch Kill Bill, that's their privilege. What I would like is to have something that is different, at least in competition with it.
Well,
And I'm not talking about moralistic art. I'm not talking about something where people are goody people are doing, but I think a more responsible thing. I'll give you an example of a truly great Catholic writer. This is a writer that nowhere in his entire works uses the word Catholicism or Christianity. J.R.R. Tolkien. He writes The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, which is, I guess, part 2 is opening this weekend. And these are stories of heroic dedication, about people who find themselves in almost impossible situations of danger and moral compromise, and heroically struggle towards, in a sense, redemption. Now, this comes out of two things: the fact that Tolkien, fought in the trenches in World War I, and the fact that he was a Catholic. but he created stories, in a sense, which embody
Interesting, yeah.
this vision of human courage, of human dedication, and the possibility of redemption. And that's and I think when actually they film these things truthfully, they're immensely popular. People are deeply moved by these things. This is not him writing about nuns and priests, being doing charity work.
Dana, we interviewed an author just last week. I think it was last week. He wrote the book called The 30-Something Snap. There's a character in the book named Sylvia, who is a 65-year-old woman, very strong Catholic. There's even a prayer in the book. Mm-hmm. And it's a book about a guy who goes to peep shows and strip clubs, but she's not part of that world. In fact, she's instrumental in changing him. And, anyway, so maybe some of what you're talking about is starting to emerge.
Mm-hmm. Well, but I hope so. I mean, I think the fact that this essay that I wrote, my essay is a very intellectual, almost scholarly piece in some regard, although I like to think it's awfully well written, has had this immense reaction. I mean, much bigger than I expected. I expected when I published that I would be mostly attacked. But I've been overwhelmed by Catholics, even in Australia, having somehow seen this piece, which has only been out 2 weeks, with an enormous, positive reaction. So I think people have been waiting for someone to say this.
Yeah, Dan,
sometimes, people know something, but they're afraid to acknowledge something unless they hear.
Maybe, and maybe you're opening up something that needs to be opened up. Dan, we are out of time, but I want the listeners to get some information from you, so that they can look up the article. How do they do that?
Well, my last name is impossible to spell, so just put First Things, which is the name of the magazine.
Uh-huh.
The article is called The Catholic Writer Today. My name's Dana Gioia, so if they put a Dana there, that might come up. But First Things, The Catholic Writer Today. If you Google it, it'll come up.
And actually, Robin made it real easy. If you go to the WOCA.com website and you go to the guest list for today, you'll see Dana's name at the 1105 slot, and the website is right there. And it's a long one, but it's there. Dana, fascinating conversation. Thank you for what you're doing for all of us, and you're making some really good points. Have a great Christmas. Thank you for being on the air with us today.
Well, and thank you for a fantastic conversation. You guys are great.
Thank you. No, I think you're great. We'll take a little break, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to WOCA News Talk 1370, Ocala's source for what's happening in today's hottest, up-to-date news and topics.
On December 21st, join us for the WOCA Jingle Ball, an evening at the Appleton Museum. From 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., come enjoy the beautiful collection of colorful trees, nutcrackers, and countless decorations throughout the Appleton Museum. Musicians from the Ocala Symphony Orchestra will be performing throughout the first floor exhibits, while you are enjoying holiday entertainment and culinary delights. Your donation will help provide Marion County children the opportunity to experience the magic of Christmas on Christmas Day through Ocala's Operation Feed 100 program. A limited amount of tickets will be available, so for more information and to purchase your tickets, go to WOCA.com and click on the Jingle Ball link.
Here are today's headlines from the source WOCA. The Ocala Police Department is reporting a violent robbery of a convenience store early yesterday, during which the robber sprayed pepper spray at the clerk and then hit her.